Welcome to Collegial Conversations with Diana Clark, the professional webinar series that offers clinical and personal perspectives on issues that are common, but often not talked about. Here is today's Collegial Conversation.
Thank you for joining us for Collegial Conversations. Today's guest is Stephen Wolt. Stephen is the president of the Freedom Institute and Veritas. Together, they'll be talking about the specific difficulties of recovery for lawyers and other licensed professionals. Welcome to the show, Stephen, and I'll turn it over to Diana.
Thank you, Katie. Welcome, Stephen. I have been looking forward to talking with you. I've been familiar with the Freedom Institute for years. And what I would love to know is what's new there and how and why you started your Veritas program. So, welcome.
It's awesome to be there, and what a great question to start this interview with. So I am president of Freedom Institute, and I'm also the co-founder of Veritas. And so Freedom Institute, for those that don't know, we're a large New York City-based outpatient treatment provider that we've been in Midtown Manhattan in the same building since 1976. So we've been around a minute. Really with a focus on treating substance use disorder and co-occurring mental health, really for working professionals and a lot of work with families. So over the decades, Freedom Institute has done really significant work in that space. In 2018, I co-founded with Freedom Institute a company by the name of Veritas. And really interesting, we designed this and built this pre-COVID. But what Veritas is a telehealth treatment program for licensed professionals. Now, telehealth today is an afterthought, but when we started building these programming out, it was a very much an innovative, exciting, brand new idea around how to deliver treatment via a platform like this, but really specifically for licensed professionals. And so much of the genesis of those ideas were from my own experiences as a highly functioning executive in long-term recovery from cocaine and sex addiction. And so, I had gone through the experiences I went through and really wanted to do something different in the space based on what I thought was missing in areas that I thought we could improve upon.
And so what would those areas be? Come on, I have ideas too. I always want to hear.
Yeah, my story in a nutshell is interesting because it plays a part in where we are today, both Freedom Institute and Veritas. So, I was born and raised in New York City. I was a very successful early in my life. I was a partner in a firm that put in executive benefits at large law firms and hospital systems. And, in my 20s, was really successful and made a lot of money. In hindsight, my mother always told me this when my 20s, this isn't going to work out well for you, Steve. But I thought that was what I needed to feel good about myself. And I had access to a lot of money. In 2004, I really kicked off a very serious cocaine addiction and pornography addiction. And the two together were devastating. And over a 4-year period of time, I ended up bottoming out really hard. I ended up losing the business, which was a significant business. I ended up almost bankrupting myself, in and out of treatment programs, in and out of treatment facilities, trouble with the law. It was really ugly. It was really nasty. 2007, 2008, I liked, see like the Red Hot Chili Peppers go on tour, all the cities that they visited. I did that with rehabs in 07 and 08, right? I went to these great facilities for 30 days, did the treatment. At the time, I was this kind of great client. I had willingness, and then I would just re-enter my work and re-enter my life. And then within 30 or 40 days, or maybe a little longer, 2 months, I'd be back in a hotel room using drugs and acting out. And it was devastating. I had become suicidal because I wanted to get sober. and I couldn't. And my career had played such a pivotal role as to who I was as a man. I was very, in hindsight, warped and delusioned around that. But in many ways, I was just so broken inside. And but for the grace of God, in 2009, I found a treatment facility in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, that specialized in childhood trauma, both physical and sexual abuse and sex addiction. And I stayed there for 4 months. And that was the turning point in my life, in healing, getting the help that I needed, which was really specific to what I was going through. The drug and alcohol treatment programs that I were participating in were great programs. There's nothing wrong with those programs at all, but I needed additional help, and I needed very specific help, especially around childhood, the traumas that I had experienced. And I found it. But for the grace of God, had I not found that program, I have no doubt I wouldn't be here today. Right. And so I was in so much pain and suffering so severely, and just coping, using drugs and acting out in unconscionable ways to deal with that pain. And then it became my journey in recovery, and was very interesting. And I had gone back to my old career, and I had relocated out to Los Angeles from New York because I had such a big 12-step community, especially around the S stuff, where it was, 10, 15 years ago, was in many ways, it was taboo in certain circles. But when you got to Los Angeles, like, everything flies in Los Angeles. I mean, you could walk into an S meeting, 12-step meeting, there'd be 100 people there on a Wednesday morning. And so I just found a home there. It felt safe. I started building a community there. I went back to my old work. And in 2016, I really started hating what I was doing for a living. The healthier I got, the less I wanted to do what I was doing professionally. And depression started creeping in, and I was just like, I don't really understand what's going on here. I'm doing the work, and I don't feel good about my life. And so I came to the realization that maybe there was a way. I'd gotten so active in 12-step communities around sponsoring men, and I kind of loved it. And so maybe there's something to do in this space in the professional communities where I could take my experiences, most of which were horrific in nature, and use it for good, and try to identify areas that I could add value and maybe get involved in working in recovery. And the light switch went off in 2017. I was living in Santa Monica. I have a psychiatrist that's in Beverly Hills. And if you know Los Angeles, that's 5 miles apart. But I literally had to block off an afternoon to go see this psychiatrist for 30 minutes to renew Wellbutrin and pay $50 for parking and commute back and forth with Los Angeles traffic. And on the way home, I said to myself, there's just got to be a better way to do this. And I was so frustrated. And earlier that day, I had been on a video conference for a work-related thing. I said, why couldn't we have done that? And so that kind of light switch went off in my head, and I started to really dive into why telehealth wasn't being used in behavioral health the way it was being used in other areas of medicine, and kind of just opened the door and ended up partnering up with Freedom Institute. I had known Bob Miller, the chairman of the board, from AA many, many years ago, and great guy, kind of been a mentor of mine. And I just started sharing some ideas, and we decided to create Veritas, and here we are today.
So you created Veritas before you became president of Freedom.
Long before I became.
So what was that? You developed Veritas, got that off the ground, and then switched into the role. And
what ended up happening is we developed Veritas, and we decided to get really granular in our focus, working with impaired healthcare professionals. COVID happened, and we really felt that the need would be greatest in working with impaired healthcare professionals, because the convenience and confidentiality we thought would really lend itself well to impaired nurses and physicians who have such issues with their licenses and their medical boards, and those higher levels of confidentiality would just lend itself really well in reducing the barriers to getting help. and the program did well. And interestingly enough, earlier this year, we decided to really start to bring the two organizations together. Veritas had used Freedom Institute's clinical infrastructure. So they were a partner, but they were also the clinical partner of Freedom Institute. So I started getting intimately involved with the team here and the resources here, which are just spectacular in nature, the way they deliver clinical treatment for these issues. And I took over the role as president. And the first thing I did was what can we do at Freedom Institute that we learned at Veritas and lends itself really well? And what we learned is that there's this whole area of professionals, much broader than licensed professionals, doctors and nurses and lawyers, that could benefit from highly confidential treatment done on a telehealth platform, receiving treatment with their professional peers, which goes over really well in residential treatment programs. But as you transition out to the outpatient treatment model, almost impossible with a brick and mortar model to kind of create programming so specific. You just had trouble kind of staying in business with that model. But telehealth, you've got this much larger geographic reach. So we replicated that and created a professionals program at Freedom Institute earlier this year. That's doing really well.
Yay. I love hearing that. So what are the cornerstones of recovery through Freedom Institute?
Yeah,
You spoke about the 12 steps yourself, but let's talk about what are the other.
Yeah, interestingly enough, there are a few things. Freedom Institute, the overarching clinical modality of all Freedom Institute's programming is dialectical behavior therapy. So it's a DBT-based programs that we use. That's just awesome in nature. So many of the professionals
couldn't benefit from DBT.
I mean, the whole world should be taking some form of DBT group, especially in this nutty age. So what we've found, Freedom Institute's doing this for decades, but what we have really found is the professionals that are coming to our program, highly functioning, highly educated professionals, being taught new skills that are just practical and applicable in real time.
Rewiring.
100%. So real students. So we have found that the DBT has worked really, really well. Now, here's the other thing that we do that's different. That's been kind of really fascinating. When I went through recovery and treatment, I went through so many different treatment programs, and I always felt that there were these incredible clinical resources, and there were like these great coaching resources, but not working together. And I was like, why is that? Why they're two different silos? So what I wanted to do, what I did with Veritas was first day of treatment, the best of clinical and the best of coaching working together from the first day of treatment. And so what we ended up doing at Veritas was I went around the country and I found physicians who are credentialed as coaches in long-term recovery to deliver coaching services to our physician clientele. And because of the background of these coaches, it ended up being a blend of coaching, not just recovery coaching, but executive and performance coaching, because they shared such similar professional and life experiences as our clientele. So really, DBT, but the integration of coaching and clinical, and not just any coaching, but the professional coaches that we have offering a blend of that coaching integrated into an IOP level of care. So those are the two things that I think, telehealth's an afterthought. Everybody's doing telehealth today. But underneath that, there are a few things I think
what you're doing differently. Yeah. The other thing I want to shout out Freedom Institute for is the family work that you guys have done. I come from a family specialist bent, and I look at all recovery as a family issue, not a family disease, but a family issue.
Yeah.
And I love how active the family was involved in the outpatient program for Freedom Institute. Is that duplicated or replicated in any way in Veritas?
100%. I mean, we feel you can't do one without the other and have long-term success. And so what's been a little different is when you're doing family programming in an IOP level of care and you're doing it in a brick and mortar setting, you can bring the families into the treatment experience. Difficult to do with telehealth IOP. So, but we absolutely incorporate family programming into the IOP, more on an individual family basis, but it's so important to the work that we do.
Mm-hmm. I got it. So I have some random questions for you.
Sure.
Who is your recovery hero and why? That's a tough one. I know.
You know, it's interesting. There are a few things that it was so hard for me to get sober.
Mhm.
I failed for years.
You didn't fail.
Meaning, from an abstinence perspective, you're 100% right. The crawling my way back into AA meetings, having relapsed and raising my hand as a newcomer for years was so hard. But the one thing in hindsight, I never, ever, ever gave up. And so my story from hell to back is a gift. And so those that I find to be heroes in recovery are those that had to battle and fight and fight, because the reality is some are sicker than others. I was one of those individuals. And so the ones that I'm attracted to are those that defy all the odds and make it to the other side.
Mine too. Mine too.
Love it. Love it.
Do you have a person that you think of?
Yeah, my friend Ben. And, you know, he's similar to me, highly functioning executive, crystal meth and sex-related issues, and combination of the two is can be so devastating. And now he's in long-term recovery. He's helping others and defied the odds and just living an amazing life today. And how cool is that?
How cool is that? How cool is that? I have a few friends who have been former opiate addicts, oddly, who have forged amazing lives and really given back to the world. And so when I think of them, Arden's brother, Chris, he didn't make it in the end, but he was a hero.
You know, life's greatest teachers sometimes are those that have experienced life's biggest falls, right? You just think about navigating your way back from that is a hero's journey.
It's a hero's journey.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. So what do you still do for your recovery, Stephen?
Yeah, so a lot. And so I'm active, very active. So, really interesting. I was telling to my brother the other day, I haven't been back to an in-person 12-step meeting in 2.5 years.
COVID.
So I probably 3 to 4 times a week, I do a 12-step meeting that we kind of formed at the very beginning of COVID. I had struggled with large Zoom, AA, and SAA meetings. I got bored of it a few months into it. And so we broke off. We formed a 6 to 8 person kind of group that almost operates like as almost a feedback group. Guys are in recovery. It's actually a blend, guys, long-term recovery from alcohol, drugs, sex. It's just kind of a group of guys that kind of came together, and we've been doing that for 2.5 years. And so that's really special.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Yeah. Is crosstalk allowed in that?
100%. It is required. And so sometimes you brace yourself, you're like, oh, here it comes. But, listen, even to this day, I got to be held accountable. People's got to call bullshit on my stuff and vice versa. And that's what works for me. Sometimes tough love, I don't want to hear, but I need to hear it. And if you develop good enough friends in these programs, which you do over time, that stuff's really important. And so exercise is critically important for me. I have to, I take medication for depression and anxiety. I take Wellbutrin. I've been on it for a very long time. Mm-hmm. But I kid you not, more than anything I do, exercise is so important. And trying to eat healthy, I ebbs and flows with that. During COVID, I put on 20 pounds, as did a lot of people, by the way. And I've just, and started August 1st trying to take that weight off. And it's so interesting how, as an addict mind, how much I soothed during COVID with food and just food. So literally, I've been chewing like a pack of gum a day, not to kind of soothe. It's so interesting. I've been at this so long. And yet here I was during COVID, throughout the entire pandemic, just using food to self-medicate and numb. But so, nutrition.
Let's even use a different term. How about cope?
Oh, good word.
Because there are different times when different coping strategies rear their heads. Yes.
And a lot better than what I used to do to cope. So, there are degrees of that. And the area I still struggle so much with this, and I hired someone to help me last month, is a meditation practice. And so I ebbs and flow with it. There are periods I get into it, and there are droughts in which I do it. So, I know so many of the people that I respect in recovery have real meditation practice.
I know. I have a busy head. I have complete monkey brain. If I can pull off 3 or 4 minutes, I've done okay. For me, I use, if you think about prayer and meditation hitting the same regions of the brain, I tend to use prayer for that. Mm-hmm. Because it is more directed and my brain can be busier. It isn't, I am a failure at meditation as well.
But you know what, you started this meeting off with music, and music helps me enormously kind of get out of my head and into my heart. And 100%. So I didn't realize to the extent that I use music to calm myself down. I use movement, get out of myself. And, sometimes I can listen to music and come to tears. And I don't know necessarily where those tears are coming, but, music helps break down the barriers that I have from really getting in touch with how and what I'm feeling. Music also is really
It bypasses the head. It goes straight to the heart. Yeah.
So music's important in my life as well.
Good. Music is nourishment to me.
Yeah, me too.
Love a fellow compatriot in the music world. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Anything else you would like our audience to know today?
The one thing I'll share, and this is a shout out, I don't come from the treatment world. I'm not a trained clinician. I'm not a physician, right? I'm the president of an organization that I surround myself with really talented people. And I can, on a daily basis, I am so impressed with the clinical team of Freedom Institute. There's something, maybe it's because people are attracted working for a nonprofit. I am routinely so impressed on the quality of their work and how important the work is to them in helping others. And so you ask who I'm inspired by professionally on a regular basis. I come from a business school. And so the wiring is very different, right? I'm a get shit done and get it done now type of person. And routinely I'm like, Steve, and that they do such good work. And so shout out to them. They're great people doing a good job, and I am impressed by them on a regular basis. That's what.
And a shout out to you too for keeping up the good fight, working through the fight personally and professionally.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Stephen.
Great to meet you. I hope to meet you in person one day.
Definitely.
Thank you for joining this webinar. Tune in to more webinars and sign up for our newsletter at o'connorpg.com.